In 1844, two young Italian brothers stood before a firing squad. Their wrists were bound. Austrian soldiers lined up with loaded rifles, and the final order could come at any second. They knew they were about to die. Yet instead of begging for mercy, they raised their voices and shouted, "Long live Italy!" The words were astonishing because the nation they praised did not actually exist. There was no Kingdom of Italy, no Italian parliament, and no national army. There was only an idea. For that idea, they willingly gave their lives. Today, Italy is one of the most recognizable countries on earth. Millions know its famous boot-shaped peninsula, its ancient cities, and its extraordinary culture. Looking at a modern map, it is easy to assume Italy has always existed. The truth is very different. At the beginning of the 19th century, the peninsula was divided into separate states that often had little in common. A traveler moving from one region to another could encounter different laws, rulers, currencies, and even dialects. Many people identified first with their city or region, rather than any larger Italian identity. The south belonged largely to the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, ruled by the Bourbon dynasty. In central Italy, the Pope governed vast territories known as the Papal States. Across the north, Austrian influence dominated some of the richest and most important lands. In cities such as Milan, Austrian officials administered government affairs while Austrian soldiers patrolled the streets. Anyone who challenged imperial authority risked arrest, imprisonment, or worse. To many observers, this arrangement seemed permanent. One of the most powerful men in Europe, Prince Metternich of Austria, dismissed the entire idea of Italian nationhood. He famously described Italy as nothing more than a geographical expression. The statement was harsh, but many believed it was true. There was no united government, no shared political system, and no realistic path toward unification. The rulers of Europe felt confident that the peninsula would remain divided indefinitely. Yet beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. In universities, students debated liberty and national identity. Writers filled newspapers and pamphlets with bold arguments about freedom. Merchants, workers, and intellectuals quietly discussed the possibility that the people of the peninsula shared a common destiny. These conversations were dangerous, but they spread from city to city. Gradually, the idea of Italy began to feel less like a fantasy and more like a future waiting to happen. At the center of this awakening stood Giuseppe Mazzini. He possessed neither a throne nor an army. Governments viewed him as a threat, forcing him into long periods of exile. Despite this, his influence reached across the peninsula. Mazzini believed nations should be created by the will of their people, rather than by kings and emperors. To him, Italy was not a collection of disconnected states. It was a nation that had not yet been born. Determined to turn belief into action, Mazzini founded a movement called Young Italy. Its goal was clear: remove foreign domination, unite the peninsula, and create a free republic. The movement spread rapidly among students, professionals, and idealistic young people. Secret meetings took place behind closed doors. Pamphlets were smuggled across borders. New supporters joined despite knowing the risks. Membership could lead to prison, exile, or execution. Even so, thousands embraced the cause because it offered something stronger than fear. It offered hope. Soon, hope erupted into rebellion. Demonstrators filled public squares carrying green, white, and red banners. Revolutionaries built barricades in city streets and challenged governments that once appeared untouchable. For a brief moment, it seemed as though a new era had arrived. Then reality struck. Austrian armies marched against the uprisings with overwhelming force. Cannons blasted apart defensive positions. Police arrested suspected revolutionaries by the thousands. One revolt after another collapsed. The defeats were crushing. Many activists were executed. Others fled abroad. Mazzini watched friends sacrifice everything for a dream that still seemed painfully distant. By the middle of the century, a hard lesson had emerged. Passion alone could not defeat an empire. Courage alone could not create a nation. The dreamers had awakened Italy, but they could not free it. If unification was ever going to succeed, it would require more than inspiration. It would require diplomacy, political skill, military power, and a leader capable of challenging the strongest forces in Europe. Unknown to most Italians, that leader was already preparing his next move, and his arrival would change the fate of the peninsula forever. The man who would turn the dream of Italian unity into a realistic political project was not a revolutionary hiding in secret meetings or a fiery speaker standing atop barricades. He came from the halls of power. His name was Count Camillo di Cavour, and he was almost the complete opposite of Giuseppe Mazzini. Where Mazzini inspired people with passion and idealism, Cavour relied on patience, calculation, and strategy. He understood a lesson that many revolutionaries refused to accept. Dreams could inspire a nation, but dreams alone could not defeat an empire. By the middle of the 19th century, Austria remained the greatest obstacle to Italian unification. Austrian troops occupied key territories in northern Italy, and Austrian influence stretched across much of the peninsula. Although the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia was the strongest and most modern Italian state, it was still no match for Austria in a direct conflict. Any war fought alone would likely end in disaster. Cavour saw this reality clearly. If Italy was ever going to unite, Austria would need to be defeated with the help of a powerful ally. Before searching for allies, Cavour focused on strengthening his own kingdom. Railways expanded across the countryside, factories multiplied, trade increased, roads improved. The military was reorganized and modernized. Visitors who arrived in Piedmont began to notice something unusual. This small kingdom no longer looked like a minor state struggling for survival. It was beginning to resemble a rising European power. Yet modernization was only the first step. Cavour needed a way to place the Italian question before the eyes of Europe. The opportunity arrived unexpectedly in 1854, when the Crimean War broke out. The conflict involved Russia on one side and Britain and France on the other. It was a war fought far from Italy and seemed completely unrelated to Italian independence. Most people assumed Piedmont would stay out of it. Instead, Cavour shocked everyone. He sent 15,000 Piedmontese soldiers to fight alongside Britain and France. The decision caused outrage. Families wondered why their sons should risk their lives on distant battlefields. Critics accused Cavour of wasting Italian blood in a foreign struggle. To many observers, the decision appeared reckless, but Cavour was playing a much larger game. He understood that wars were not won only on battlefields. They were also won at negotiating tables. When the conflict ended, his gamble paid off. Piedmont earned a seat at the peace conference in Paris. For the first time, the issue of Italy was discussed before the most powerful leaders in Europe. Cavour seized every opportunity. He spoke about Austrian domination in northern Italy and argued that the peninsula deserved a different future. More importantly, he caught the attention of one of the most influential rulers on the continent, Napoleon III of France. Napoleon dreamed of reshaping Europe and expanding French influence. Cavour recognized an opportunity. If France could be persuaded to support Piedmont, Austria's position might finally be threatened. In the summer of 1858, the two men met secretly in the French town of Plombières. Away from reporters and diplomats, they discussed a plan that could change history. France agreed to support Piedmont in a future war against Austria. In return, France would receive territorial concessions. However, there was one crucial condition. France would only intervene if Austria appeared to be the aggressor. Austria had to strike first. The challenge was enormous, but Cavour accepted it. He increased military preparations near the Austrian frontier. Newspapers criticized Austrian rule. Political refugees found protection inside Piedmont. Every move was carefully calculated. He wanted Austria angry enough to react, but not enough to accuse Piedmont of openly starting a war. Month after month, tensions grew. Finally, in 1859, Austria lost patience. An ultimatum arrived demanding that Piedmont stop its military preparations. Cavour refused. Austria declared war. The trap had worked. French troops crossed the Alps and joined Piedmont's army. Together, they launched a powerful campaign against Austrian forces. The fighting was brutal. At Magenta and Solferino, the battlefields were covered with thousands of dead and wounded soldiers. Entire units were shattered in the chaos. The scenes were so horrific that they later helped inspire humanitarian efforts that contributed to the creation of the International Red Cross. Victory seemed close. Austrian power in northern Italy appeared to be collapsing. Then everything changed. Napoleon III became increasingly alarmed by the scale of the bloodshed and the possibility of a wider European war. Without consulting Cavour, he negotiated peace with Austria. The conflict ended before Austrian influence had been completely removed. When Cavour learned what had happened, he was furious. Years of planning appeared ruined. In frustration, he resigned from office, convinced that the dream of Italian unity had been betrayed. Yet history was already moving in a new direction. Across central Italy, several smaller states overthrew their rulers and voted to join Piedmont. The map of the peninsula began to change. For the first time, a large portion of Italy stood united under a single government. The impossible was becoming possible. But while diplomats celebrated and politicians negotiated, a new force was rising in the south. Unlike Cavour, this man cared little for conferences, treaties, or cautious planning. He believed in action, courage, and risk. Before long, he would launch one of the most daring military campaigns in modern history. and placed the future of Italy in his own hands. While Count Cavour was reshaping Europe's political landscape through diplomacy and careful alliances, another force was rising in the south that cared little for treaties, conferences, or royal negotiations. This force revolved around a single extraordinary man whose name would become legendary throughout Italy. Giuseppe Garibaldi was everything Cavour was not. He was not a nobleman, a politician, or a master diplomat. He was a soldier, a revolutionary, and a man of action. Dressed in his famous red shirt and blessed with an almost fearless personality, he inspired loyalty wherever he went. To ordinary Italians, he represented courage itself. If Cavour was the architect of unification, Garibaldi would become its sword. Garibaldi's road to fame had been long and dangerous. As a young man, he joined revolutionary movements inspired by Giuseppe Mazzini. When those movements failed, he was forced into exile. Most men would have abandoned the cause. Garibaldi did the opposite. He crossed the Atlantic and spent years fighting in South America. There he survived brutal conflicts, learned guerrilla warfare, and developed a reputation for leading men through impossible situations. Every battle hardened him further. By the time he returned to Italy, he was no longer simply a revolutionary. He was a battle-tested commander with a growing legend attached to his name. In the spring of 1860, Garibaldi made a decision so bold that many considered it madness. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies remained one of the largest states in Italy. It possessed a professional army of more than 100,000 soldiers, powerful fortifications, and substantial resources. Any military expert would have concluded that defeating such a kingdom required a massive army and years of preparation. Garibaldi ignored the experts without waiting for approval from either Cavour or King Victor Emmanuel II. He assembled a volunteer force of roughly 1,000 men. They came from every walk of life. Some were students, others were teachers, craftsmen, writers, merchants, and idealists. Many had little military experience. Their weapons were often outdated, and their equipment was far from impressive. Yet they possessed something far more important. They believed completely in the cause they served. History would remember them as the Thousand. In May 1860, they boarded 2 steamships and sailed toward Sicily. Their mission appeared hopeless. Many observers expected them to be defeated the moment they landed. When Garibaldi's volunteers came ashore near Marsala, Bourbon officials treated the invasion almost as a joke. 1,000 volunteers seemed insignificant compared to a professional army, but that confidence quickly disappeared. At the Battle of Calatafimi, Garibaldi's small force confronted a much larger enemy. The fighting was fierce. Smoke filled the air, gunfire echoed across the hills, and casualties mounted on both sides. According to legend, Garibaldi urged his men forward by declaring that they would either make Italy or die trying. Whether those exact words were spoken or not, they perfectly captured the spirit of the campaign. Against all expectations, the Thousand won. The victory changed everything. News raced across Sicily. Villagers, farmers, laborers, and local patriots began joining Garibaldi's movement. What had started as a tiny expedition transformed into a growing popular uprising. With each success, his army became larger and stronger. More importantly, the Bourbon government began losing confidence. Garibaldi understood momentum better than most generals. He refused to give his enemies time to recover. Instead, he pushed forward relentlessly, capturing key positions and keeping his opponents off balance. His greatest success in Sicily came with the capture of Palermo. The fall of the city sent shockwaves throughout the peninsula. Newspapers celebrated the victory. Ordinary Italians followed every development with excitement. For many, unification was no longer a distant dream. It suddenly felt possible, but Garibaldi was not finished. Crossing the narrow waters that separated Sicily from mainland Italy, he launched an invasion that stunned Europe. As his forces advanced northward, resistance began collapsing. Soldiers deserted. Officials abandoned their posts. Entire communities welcomed the red shirts as liberators. Garibaldi's reputation became a weapon as powerful as any army. Fear spread among his enemies while hope spread among his supporters. By the time he approached Naples, the Bourbon monarchy was crumbling. The king fled the capital, leaving the city behind. Garibaldi entered Naples to enormous celebrations. Crowds lined the streets, cheering the man many now viewed as the hero of Italy. Within only a few months, Garibaldi controlled most of southern Italy. The achievement seemed almost unbelievable. A campaign launched by 1,000 volunteers had destroyed an entire kingdom, yet victory created a dangerous new problem. Garibaldi now possessed enormous influence and commanded an army fiercely loyal to him. His next goal was clear. He wanted to march on Rome. For Cavour, the prospect was terrifying. Rome remained under French protection, and any attack could trigger international conflict. Years of careful diplomacy could be destroyed overnight. Even worse, Some feared Garibaldi might establish his own revolutionary republic rather than submit his conquests to the monarchy. Determined to avoid disaster, Cavour convinced King Victor Emmanuel II to act. The royal army began moving south. As both forces advanced toward one another, a shocking possibility emerged. The two greatest champions of Italian unity were on a collision course. Both fought for Italy. Both wanted unification, yet they envisioned different futures. For one tense moment, it seemed possible that Italians might turn their weapons against fellow Italians, and that the dream of unity could collapse at the very moment victory appeared within reach. As autumn spread across the Italian peninsula in 1860, the future of the national movement hung by a thread. Decades of sacrifice, revolution, diplomacy, and war had brought Italy closer to unity than ever before, yet everything could still be destroyed in a single moment. In the south, Giuseppe Garibaldi commanded a victorious army whose soldiers admired him with near-legendary devotion. In the north, King Victor Emmanuel II led the forces of Piedmont Sardinia, supported by the political framework that Count Cavour had spent years constructing. Both sides claimed to serve Italy. Both believed they were fighting for the same goal, yet they represented different visions of the future. One symbolized revolutionary idealism, the other represented monarchy, order, and political stability. If either side made the wrong decision, the dream of unification could end in civil war. The crisis reached its climax on October 26, 1860, near the small town of Teano. Across Europe, governments watched carefully. Diplomats understood that the meeting about to take place could determine the fate of an entire nation. Garibaldi held enormous power. His victories had given him control over vast territories and millions of people. He could have demanded a republic. He could have challenged the monarchy. He could have divided the peninsula and created his own political order. Many of his supporters expected exactly that. Instead, he made a decision that secured his place in history. As Garibaldi rode forward to meet King Victor Emmanuel II, he greeted him as the future ruler of a united Italy. In a single moment, he surrendered authority over the lands his army had conquered. He did not ask for a throne. He did not seek wealth. He did not demand political power. The man who had defeated a kingdom simply handed his achievements to another leader because he believed national unity mattered more than personal ambition. Few moments in modern history carry such symbolic weight. With that gesture, the threat of civil war disappeared. The North and South were finally joined together. Territories that had spent centuries divided by rival dynasties, foreign occupations, and competing interests were now moving toward a common future. What had once seemed impossible was becoming reality. The movement that began in secret meetings and underground organizations was creating a nation. Only a few months later, in 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was officially proclaimed. Across the peninsula, celebrations erupted. For generations, Italians had dreamed of national unity. Many had been imprisoned, exiled, or executed while pursuing that goal. Now the dream existed in political reality. Yet even during this moment of triumph, tragedy struck. Count Cavour, the statesman who had guided much of the unification process, suddenly fell ill and died. He did not live long enough to witness the final completion of the project that had defined his career. The man who had spent years maneuvering through the dangerous world of European diplomacy was gone, just as the nation he helped create was beginning to take shape. Despite the proclamation of the kingdom, unification remained incomplete. Two of the most important cities in Italy were still beyond the control of the new state. Venice remained under Austrian rule, while Rome continued to be protected by French troops defending the authority of the Pope. To many Italians, the nation could never be truly complete while these cities remained outside its borders. The struggle therefore continued, although the decisive events would now be shaped largely by international politics. In 1866, Italy allied itself with Prussia during a major conflict against Austria. Although Italian military performance was uneven, the outcome proved favorable. Austria was defeated and Venice became part of the Kingdom of Italy. Another major piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Only Rome remained. Then in 1870, events beyond Italy's control created the opportunity national leaders had been waiting for. The outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War forced France to withdraw its troops from Rome in order to defend its own territory. Suddenly, the city's protection vanished. Italian leaders moved quickly. In September 1870, Italian soldiers advanced toward Rome. Near Porta Pia, they breached the ancient walls and entered the city. For centuries, Rome had stood at the center of empires, kingdoms, and religious authority. Now it would become the capital of a united nation. At last, the long process of unification was complete. The transformation was extraordinary. A peninsula once divided among competing rulers and foreign powers had become a single state. Even more remarkable was the fact that no single individual accomplished this achievement alone. Giuseppe Mazzini provided the vision. At a time when unity seemed impossible, He convinced Italians to imagine a shared national identity. Count Cavour supplied the strategy. Through diplomacy, modernization, and political skill, he transformed an idea into a realistic project. Giuseppe Garibaldi delivered the action. His courage and military victories turned hopes into tangible success on the battlefield. Together, these three men achieved what many believed could never happen. They transformed a land dismissed as merely a geographical expression into a united nation. Their story is more than the history of Italy. It is a reminder that lasting change often requires dreamers who can imagine a better future, strategists who can build a path toward it, and leaders willing to risk everything to make that future real. The unification of Italy remains one of the most remarkable political transformations of the modern age, proving that determination, vision, and unity can accomplish what once seemed impossible.